This video is brought to you by Patreon provider Kyle.
Pew pew. Pew pew. 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 Pew, pew.
PrimaryArms 8X at 8X. Again, we're only going to be able to see if this is going to have any abnormalities when we shift it. Windage looks good. Looks like there might be about a 1 click of slack in there. It was slightly canted to my eye, so it's shifting slightly to the right is no real surprise. But it returns pretty good. Just like the 1:6, I forgot to film the reticle overview part. However, when we moved the optic fore and aft at max magnification here at 8x, you will see that the window that we have of getting a really good image and looking through it perfectly, and there not being any blurriness or darkness to it, while not seeing so much of the scope body, doesn't really exist. It's very, very tight. And this is what we see on a lot of 1:8 LPVOs, let alone for anything in the first focal plane range. The only thing I haven't really noticed that as extreme was, of course, the Trijicon FFP Accupower 1:8 that I reviewed, which is basically perfect. But here you can see it is very, very tight. So as a result, I'm forced to shift it in that position for the remainder of the video. This is the 1:6, which if you didn't watch the video on that, go watch the review because it is significantly more forgiving. Now, yes, the 1:8 is a little bit better at 6x, but what the hell is the point of having it set up for 6x when you can go all the way to 8x and use it? So as a result, you will see much more of the scope body on this 1:8 as opposed to what we did on the 1:6, and that's just going to be the way it is. Both the 1:6 and this 8x feature the ACSS Raptor reticle, but both of them feature different drops for different calibers. Anyway, let's continue on with the show. I can't stand how much of the scope body we can see, but probably worse than that is just how much of the image you see shifting. Follow those power lines here at 1x. Look at how they twist and sway as we go past them. At the bottom, they pull all the way down. In the middle, they start pulling around, and at the top, they're going to start pulling extremely up, indicating this thing has a massive amount of fisheye. And it does. In use, it is almost nauseating to get behind. The 1:6, however, had a much flatter image, especially in the center. The edges did pull very, very slightly, but nowhere near as bad as this. However, this 8x has better illumination. It's about 1 click higher on the illumination as opposed to the 1:6. So if you're ultimately going between these two optics and nothing else, you want brighter illumination, you go with this. Now, I am a big fan of having daytime bright illumination. I know it doesn't matter for a lot of people, so take that for what it's worth. The image here at 30 yards at 8x, of course, does not look great, but who's really using 8x magnification at 30 yards? The only reason why I still showcase this is because consistency is key. Backing it out, of course, makes the image look a little bit better, but let's push our distance back a little bit farther here to 400 yards on our brick building. Keep in mind, this is not at 8x, this is still at 6x. And the image looks pretty good, but you can still see how much of the scope ID you can see because it just encompasses the rest of the image. The image in the center is clearly more than usable. It's actually very good. But towards the edges, it does not only get soft, but there's still a lot of fisheyeing going on. Just follow that parapet wall and watch it go straight, and it pulls down. And it's very noticeable when you get behind it. Like I said earlier, it's almost a little nauseating. Focusing our attention on something a little bit farther away, this power tower is around 800 yards away. The image around the reticle, again, is still very good. So if you're looking about just having a really good image in the center around the reticle, this thing will at least deliver in that regard. Let's focus our attention back on the 400-yard brick building, but push it a couple hours later in the evening. The sun's already set behind the horizon, and you can see as well through the optic as I was able to with my eye. At 1x, it lets through basically all ambient light, even in this darker environment. Here at 8x, though, it gets a little bit darker, but that's to be expected. Illumination here on full is beautiful, if I may say so. It doesn't wash out, it doesn't blossom, it doesn't do anything. It still maintains a fairly sharp edge on the reticle. Albeit, if you focus your attention a lot on the reticle, it doesn't seem as smooth as one would like. But again, this optic is built to a very, very budget-friendly price point. And you know what? You got to appreciate PrimaryArms for doing that. However, you better be sure you're 100% behind this thing, because as you can see, any shift left or right, in or out, and you're not going to be able to look through it at its maximum magnification. So just keep that in mind. Let's get out of the darkness and get into some more sunshine here at my home away from home. The first thing I'm going to illustrate again is just how much fisheye this thing has at 1x. Pay attention to the concrete on the sides. You're going to see just how much faster it moves towards the edge as opposed to at the center. Also pay attention to the black berm behind the targets. You will see how much it shifts. The same thing with the concrete walls on either side. It's a little hard to pick up because of how much of the scope body you see obstructing it, but it's a lot. Contrast that with the 1-6, there was almost none. With the illumination on full, you can just make it out during these sunny, bright days, and it's just enough to create contrast against that dark berm in the back. As you can see it clearly distinguishes itself a little bit easier than if it was off, so that's always very nice to see. The image looks well enough as far as sharpness goes here at 1x, slowly ramping up the magnification. You can see how the outer edges start to really fall apart, and once we take it to its maximum here at 8x, we still have a decent looking image here at 50 yards. So the minimum that you would really be able to use this thing is 50 yards at 8x, because 30 yards is a little bit too close. But again, only sharp in the center. Now see, I'm sure you know the image looks really good when you're at 1x and you get it just right. It's still always going to have the fisheye. The sharpness is pretty good at 1x, but it is just very, very distortion-y. Yeah, it's distortion-y. There you go. That's a word. Illumination you can barely pick up here. It's going to be tough no matter what, but the one eye is a little more forgiving, but there's just a lot of movement to it. Increasing the magnification here to 4x, and you know what? It's still pretty damn good. I had no problems getting behind this thing in awkward, tough positions or for speed. It's honestly not bad at all. Once we increase the magnification to 6x, we start seeing a lot more tightness at the cusp where it's going to be for when we need it for 8x. You can pull back from it fairly far and still get an idea of where you're going to end up, but when you're right behind it where you have to be at 8x, it's getting tight. But again, good cheek weld, good position. That's where you should be with these higher magnifications anyway. Because here at 8x, like you've already seen, you better be on this thing 100% of the time, all the time, or else it's just going to be useless. But no real surprise there. Moving to the large bore range, let's start getting into my final thoughts. For about $480 MSRP from PrimaryArms without any sort of sales or discounts, I think it's just a little bit much. Now, contrast that to the 1-6, which I will be doing a side-by-side comparison with for your viewing pleasure, or if you're torn between the two. The 6X is about $80 cheaper regularly. I'm sure on sale you could find it even cheaper. And I just prefer the 1-6 and how well it works from its minimum to its maximum magnification. Yes, you could use this 1:8 at 6x, and it does have a slightly better image and a slightly more forgiving Eyebox than it does at 8x, but the 1x does not compare. I mean, just look at the image right now. We're at 1x, and look at how much farther shifted the wood is through the optic as opposed to outside the optic. It looks like it's a foot higher up. The 1:6 has such a better 1x. It's just, it's actually a joy to get behind, and to the point where, as if you've watched that review, it trumps all the other 1:6 first focal planes that I've gotten my hands on, with the exception of the Leupold Mark 6 as far as clarity goes. Both the Credo and the Sig Tango 6 first focal plane 1:6s were garbage by comparison, and those are more than 2-3 times the price as the 1:6. I like the reticle, but I would really like it if it had German posts at 3, 6, and 9 o'clock to help draw my eye towards the center. If it had that, then having daytime bright illumination isn't going to matter as much, because I need something from just how I know I shoot to draw my eye to the middle, and it would make my life significantly better if that was the case. That, or having really bright daytime illumination. If an optic has both, like the P4XI, where it has a heavy duplex and a really, really bright center dot, then you know what? Even better. But this could still be tweaked a little bit and really just bring a lot more to the table as a result. To show you guys a slight comparison between this 1:8 and its sister 1:6, here we are. There's a couple things we can take note of right away, primarily with the reticle. The reticle is going to be larger on the 1:8 at 8x simply because they're both basically the same, with the exception of the drops. You can see under the chevron, we have obviously different spacing for different calibers. With the 1:6 on the right, we have a much sharper, clearer image from center to edge. But on the 1:8, you can clearly see that we see a little bit more through the optic. Though I don't think that's enough of a reason to go with the 1:8 over the 1:6, but more on that during the full comparison. Strafing across the berm into the 200-yard paper, we're going to be focusing on this target before we go ahead and we start looking at some other optics to compare this to, both in and around the same price point and some not. Before we do that, though, the image here is pretty decent. Again, at the center, we have a nice, sharp image of the paper and the steel to the right. It's good. It's good. The edges are just soft, and we see a lot of the scope body. But let's roll in some other optics to compare this to real quick. The first is also going to be the most direct comparison. It is the Trijicon Accupower 1:8 in first focal plane. Couple things that we can take note of. Well, first, these are both 1:8s in first focal plane. That's the first thing. Illumination on the Accupower is better. Image actually is kind of hard to depict, but I was filming with a different camera at the time, so I'm sure that has something to do with it. I'm not coming up with excuses, I'm just stating facts. But just like that, look how much more image we have through the PrimaryArms as opposed to the Trijicon. I really do love the Trijicon, but the field of view through it is significantly smaller than that through the PrimaryArms, so that is a massive win for the PrimaryArms. Now, no, this is not the first focal plane version of the Strike Eagle 1:8. This is still the second focal plane version of it. But is there really a comparison between this? Absolutely not. The image is abysmal on the Strike Eagle 1:8 second focal plane Gen II, as opposed to this PrimaryArms 1:8. Not only that, but check out the wooden walls between these two. We have on the left, the wall actually looks like it bellies down, as opposed to on the right, where it looks like it bellies up. The Strike Eagles were, or at least the 1:8 Strike Eagle was never something that I endorsed because it was just a pretty shitty image. But look at how nice the German posts are at 3, 6, and 9. It really helps draw your eye to the center. The final little side-by-side we're going to do here is of the Swampfox Arrohead 1:10 in second focal plane. Now, yes, it was a much darker day, so it's not a direct comparison. Like the other two were actually very close. But the image still looks significantly better on the Swampfox. Granted, it was a very tight Eyebox at 10x, but you had the exact same sort of Eyebox on the PrimaryArms 1:8 at 8. As far as everything else goes, well, it's a toss-up to what you are going to want. First focal plane versus second focal plane, cap turrets versus non-cap turrets, blah, 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 blah. But this is just a showcase for you guys to understand what to really expect. I've actually been catching a lot of flack from people in the comments section about, oh, well, I don't like that, I don't like this, I don't like that, I don't agree. And guess what? That's great. You're entitled to your own opinion, just like I am. This is America. We have options. If you don't like something, get something else, go somewhere else. I don't like steak. Don't go to a steakhouse. Go to a fish market. Go here, go there, go there, go there. I'm just trying to illustrate exactly what you're going to be getting through an optic. And that is why that's why I made this channel. So this way you can see for yourself what you're going to be getting before you get it. Anyway, that's all for this review. I don't really like this that much, but there are worse options out there. But I still think the 1-6 is the better of the two in my preference, and I'll be showcasing that in a direct comparison between the two. Anyway, Kyle, thank you so much for sending this in for review. It was a blast. If any of you are wondering, Kyle agreed with me on the 1-6 versus the 1-8, which is why he already sold the 1-8 and kept the 1-6. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching, and as always, see you again next time. And a huge thank you to all of my Patreon providers. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. If you would like to join my Patreon but can't, I completely understand. But you're more than welcome to check out the affiliate links in the description below to help me in other ways. Again, thank you very much for watching.